TriCaster Vizion systems have bidirectional SDI ports. We can go in and reconfigure the ports to operate either as inputs or outputs based upon our workflow needs. Let's take a look at how we get the card configured and use it as inputs. I'm in my TriCaster session already, and let's see how the card is currently configured. We can do that by going to the Setup button at the top of the interface. Then in this window, go to the Connectors tab, and we will see the cards in our system. Now, I want to point out that this tab only appears if your Vizion system has SDI cards in it. If it's a completely IP-based Vizion system, you won't have this tab. My system happens to have one SDI card. We can see the current configuration that all 8 of the SDI ports are configured as inputs. So let's bring in some video on these inputs. I will go to input 1, click on its gear, and under the source option, if I click the drop down, under local, you can see A1 through A8. These are all 8 of my SDI ports, and I happen to have some video sources connected up on the first 2. So let's set those up on the system. If I had 2 SDI cards, you would have then a B1 through potentially B8, depending on how it's configured. But let's say that I want to reconfigure my card to have 4 SDI ins and 4 SDI outs. Let's see how we get that done. In order to reconfigure the card, we have to exit back to the home screen. Then on the home screen, we go to the configuration option. And at the top, you can see settings and connectors. Again, the connectors option will only appear if your system has an SDI card in it. And then below are our configuration options. So we can choose whether or not we want to use Genlock on this card. That would connect into the ref port. I'm not using that, so I'm going to leave it off. And then down below, for each card in your system, you can then choose how many ins and how many outs you want. And just by selecting this, it will show you what the current configuration will be. Typically, inputs will start on the left and move towards the right, and outputs will start on the right and move towards the left. So let's say we want to have a 4 in, 4 out mode. You can see this is what the configuration of the card will be in that mode. And then I can apply it, and this will reflash the card with that new configuration. Or if I want to just leave and not alter the card at all, we can revert back to our default settings. But we'll go to 4 in, 4 out, hit apply. Now, this process will take a little bit of time to go and reflash the card. It's also possible that you may need to reboot your system after the flashing is finished. So I'm going to let this finish. We'll see if a reboot is necessary, and then we'll go back into our session. We can see that it is telling me we must reboot after our configuration change. So I'll hit the Restart Now button. Here we are after our reboot, and let's just take a look. I'll go back to configuration. We can see the card is now configured in the 4 in, 4 out mode. And let's go open our session we were working on. You'll notice that the system is going to warn us that the SDI configuration for this session has changed since the last time I used it. We originally had an 8 in, 0 out mode. Now we're in a 4 in, 4 out. And it gives us 3 options. We can either just cancel loading the session. Maybe it's the wrong session I intended to open. We can load the session, keeping the mapping I currently have of 4 in, 4 out. Or I can update the card back to what the session expected, and then potentially reboot and then open the session. But I'm going to leave the configuration alone and show you what happens. We'll just open. And at this point, the session will open. And the only thing we will need to do is make sure that any configuration that is invalid, we adjust. For example, I no longer have an inputs 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I will not be able to get video on those SDI inputs. So if I have input set up on those sources, I'll need to go change them to something else if necessary to make the session work again. So here we are back in the system, and I'll just show you input 5. I originally did have set up on SDI 5. When I open it, you'll see it's still looking for it, but of course this port doesn't exist anymore, so it will not be able to use it. So I can just click on the drop down, go to local, and there I can see I now only have 4 SDI inputs configured, but I can reset this up to use one of the existing 4 or any other source available on the TriCaster Vizion system.